Hi, I'm Shanil Kaderali, Executive Vice President of Talent Strategy and Solutions at Pierpoint. We are a global recruiting company with offices in the US, Europe, and Latin America. We serve clients like Juniper Networks, Varian Medical Systems, Symantec, Red Bull, and others. We are strong believers in using science in the recruiting practice and our approaches. We work with our clients on optimizing not only recruiting, but retention as well for better ROI. With us today is Dr. Paul Zak. Paul, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Shanil. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're very happy to have you here, and I know a lot of our clients are really excited. And, we'd really love to learn about, how you fell into neuroscience and then applied it to economics to create Neuro-Economics.
So the honest answer is frustration. So I was doing work on trust at the country level and why you trust a stranger, and people really couldn't tell us why they were doing what they're doing. And given my background in neuroscience and in economics, I thought, gee, maybe I could smash these together and make something new. So I know you have never made a bad decision in your life, but your brother-in-law who was buying investment real estate in 2007 when everybody knew it was a bubble, what's the deal with that? So one of our hopes is by studying neuroscience, we can actually improve the way people make decisions and thereby improve individuals, organizations, and even nations' outcomes.
The next question that a lot of our clients have around the area of neuroscience, and you've touched on it, is really why should they trust you? Like, what are some real concrete examples of ROI that you can share with us that you've worked on with some of the organizations that you've worked with, and just kind of give us an idea about the ROI? Because, one of the greatest challenges from an HR perspective is convincing the CFO.
First of all, I have no dog in this fight, so 90% of my work is in science, and you can read the peer-reviewed articles. Having said that, I have a great passion for improving society, for improving people's lives, and I think a big leverage point is organizations. So don't trust me. Think of management as a series of experiments. I think there's no global optimum that we're ever going to meet because the world's changing, the people around us are changing, the environment's changing. So if you think of this as an experiment that you're running as a leader, think of changing one thing that will improve outcomes. I wouldn't think about ROI outcomes, but certainly cost it. So I want to make my employees more engaged at work. So I took in my lab, took a page out of the Google playbook, and I started buying beer and wine. After 5 o'clock, knock yourselves out. We have a big patio, have beer, wine, and snacks. Oh, that's a good investment for me, right? I have a lot of young people in my lab, graduate students. Yeah. Enjoy yourself, build some social relationships. And guess what happens when you're sitting on the patio outside the lab? You start talking about, hey, I'm working on this project. Do you know anything about how to use this new ECG machine that measures the heart rate? Because I don't really understand that. We went through training and boom, we're talking about work, okay, just because I bought a $2 beer for somebody. So first of all, think of this as a little experiment. So I can cost how much that beer cost, right? So I pay whatever it is, $30 a month, and let me see what happens. So it's often difficult from the CFO's perspective to say, well, I know what the cost is, but what's the return?
Exactly.
So the return, if I can't measure it directly in productivity, could be measured in things like retention, healthcare costs, or greater happiness. So again, for these high-trust, high-purpose organizations, happiness is what we call in mathematics a sufficient statistic, right? Sort of one variable that tells me everything else is going well. Right? If people are unhappy, they're pale, they're going to the doctor every day, they're taking time off work.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah. It's bad for everybody. It's bad for the employee, it's bad for the organization. So, but having said that, if you have an innovation you do in which you can't quantify some way the ROI, right? I write a check every month like you do to pay people's rent and pay for their mortgages. Stop it. So try it for a month, determine your outcome measures. What do I want to do? Measure happiness, measure trust, measure how long employees stay after work's over. I mean, think of real concrete ways to measure this and run a little experiment, run it for a month, see what happens. If it doesn't work, pull back. So, I'm very hard-headed about this. I think it's all nice that it feels good, we can hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but the bottom line is, if you're losing money every month, everyone's out of a job, right? Exactly. That's not good for anybody. Yeah.
Well, I love that response, and if you can get $2 beer, I would like to know where you can get it, because here in California, it's Costco. Okay, great. And we do the same thing. We have people globally, and we actually ship them beer and wine at home sometimes. Great. And our average, our retention rate's like 95%. And these folks can, we've got former doctors who've become recruiters, engineers who've become recruiters, and they get approached by other companies to work for them, and they just won't leave. And I think that's what it's about at the end of the day. Noted that the effect on the brain with social media is very similar to falling in love. How would you apply that to companies wanting to retain their employees?
Right, so social media can be a big morass for companies in which you don't want secrets being tweeted out, and yet we know we're social creatures. So we've shown actually that when we use social media of all types, the brain releases chemicals associated with friendship and caring and connection and even love. And so in the world in which we have many more virtual employees, using social media to connect people to each other is a very cost-effective and brain-effective way to actually build the social relationships that a good working organization has. So I think instead of thinking of social media as you're goofing off or you're living out trade secrets, it should be, here's an effective way that we can show transparency to our clients and build connections with our employees.
So you'd advocate a much more transparent environment with social media for organizations to improve the level of trust that they have with their employees.
It does. It gives you a level of transparency. So one of the ones that does this, for example, is Zappos. So Zappos employees have no restrictions and they can tweet out anything they like. Now, if you're working for the Department of Defense, maybe a different story. So I think it's, we still need rules on when this is appropriate, what you can talk about. And I think this is also a kind of a discretion versus rules. You can't think of every possible way to limit what's going on social media. So I think you can endow your employees with this sense of trust and say, look, people using social media, they're interested in our company, that's great. Let's give them some information. Let's not be doofuses about it, right? So nothing racist, nothing sexist, no trade
some
secrets.
guidelines, of
Yeah,
course.
some guidelines, and please use your best judgment.
Yeah. You mentioned Zappos. They're a very interesting organization. What other things do you think they're doing to help promote trust within their organization so that they're really able to retain some of their top talent?
Right, so we've been working with Zappos intensely for the last year, and we found this amazing culture. And so when we measure things like trust in the organization and the constituent factors that create trust, we find Zappos is just about the best company we've ever measured. So they've worked on developing culture, and that culture is really a person-centric culture. So about choosing, first of all, choosing people who are going to fit into that, who are engaging, who are lively, who are fun, and also a little quirky, if you know about Zappos.
Yeah, definitely.
And then encouraging to do that. So you want to put up, weird Hawaiian decor in your cubicle, knock yourself out. Zappos has, for example, a life coach. So maybe I want to figure out how I'm going to save some money to buy my first house, or maybe I have a baby on the way, and I need to start a savings plan.
And this is an on-site life coach?
This is on-site, an employee actually. So think about if this is the most important capital you have in your company, human capital. I need to nurture that capital. I need to grow that capital. Now, what's the payoff? What Zappos has seen is very low employee turnover. So when the
Do you know what the number is? Do you have an idea?
I think it's more like 10%.
That's incredible.
Average in retail and sales is around 100% a year.
Yeah.
They're around the 10% level.
Yep.
So across all the companies that we've studied, we found that employee turnover is a very strong indicator of a well-run organization.
Definitely.
So you can reverse engineer that process, which is, gee, what do I need to do to keep these employees engaged, productive, and happy? So I think adding happiness, what I call joy. Are you having joy at work? Maybe not every second of an 8-hour day, but you come in, you're engaged, it's fun. So this is, I think, something that we need to think about. We're going to have labor shortages. I mean, we can't import people from overseas forever. And to the extent that I want to keep the best employees here working for me long term, right? Recruiting is very expensive. That's your business.
Yeah.
Right? So how do we keep these guys here? Let's focus on making it a place that's really engaging, challenging. Challenge is very good. We can talk about that some more. But also that I get the sense of accomplishment, and I'm going to do that in a place that trusts me, that empowers me to be who I am.
You mentioned in your book that states, right? When you look at states that have, or countries that have high levels of trust, show things like higher levels of income, stability. And what you're talking about in this way is applying that to companies, and for-profit or nonprofit. And could you add any other insights to that whole area of like how you see, countries that have been able to do that, like Norway and Sweden, to, not just the Zapposes of the world, but to the IBMs of the world that are really big, for example?
Right, so IBM almost has its own country
Yeah.
unto itself. So this is actually how I started doing the neuroscience experiments. Was we had found in the late 90s that among the strongest predictors economists had ever found to predict which countries would be prosperous and which would be poor was interpersonal trust.
Got it.
So these consistently rich countries that maintain high rates of growth, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, are the highest trust countries in the world. The US is around the middle.
Yeah.
And we identified the factors, many of those biological factors, that help sustain high rates of innovation, high rates of social interaction from which wealth is created. So that's why companies started coming to me asking, gee, how do we do this at the individual level? And I said, wait, we don't actually understand why two strangers trust each other. So let's run some experiments and do that for a dozen years and really understand that brain system and then port that back over to companies. So the short answer is that in these companies that are constructed, just like Norway was constructed, right? They have social construction, they have informal structures, they have formal structures.
Yeah.
We can do the same thing in companies, and that is build these high trust environments where things can actually be sustained for a long period of time. And those things are high innovation, high engagement, high happiness, low employee turnover. So I think that's really the key. Now, punchline, before I started doing the experiments, I'm not completely nuts. We looked at 85 different variables across countries to see what correlated most strongly with trust. You know what the variable was that was most correlated?
No, don't tell us.
Happiness.
Interesting.
Yeah, and a big negative correlation with depression. So people in Norway and Sweden and Denmark are really happy. Now, I don't want to make a claim on causation. Is it the trust that makes them happy or the happiness that makes them more trusting? But whatever that is, we've identified the environments where that happens. So great feedback, social connections are high, right?
Yeah.
Think of Norway.
Great relationships.
Sure, absolutely,
Yeah.
right? So in your own company, think of this sort of Peter Drucker rule, the 20 times rule. So if the CEO is making a zillion times more than the average worker, then you have this high income distribution. Then we're not all on the same team. Now you work for me.
And now with social media, people see that, and they can see the differences in the inequality, and that's not working. I do think that it's not right to villainize the wealthy or the successful CEO, but at the same token, there needs to be transparency and fairness in the workplace that I think that most people today are not seeing.
That's right. And so actually transparency is one of those 8 factors that builds trust. And what we found is that in laboratory studies, when transparency is low, I'm trying to figure out what game you're playing.
Yeah.
Instead of me just saying, hey, he's my leader, we're on a project, let's work our tails off and nail this thing for the client. Instead I'm thinking about, oh, you're trying to get a promotion. Oh, you have some other agenda.
Yeah.
So a lot of companies, Semco in Brazil is a great example, open all the books. Whole Foods does this, Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
Every
They show the
employee
salaries.
Yeah, actually do. They show salaries.
Yeah.
And so this is scary. I started doing this about a year ago in my lab. I showed everybody my salary. Because we're on projects, they see me writing, budgets, and so eventually it's going to get out.
Yeah.
Was it hard? Yeah, it was hard. But on the other hand, I think, you know what? I work, really hard. They see me working every day. I got to run this big organization. Well, for me, big, 30-person organization, and yeah, I get paid to do it.
Yeah,
Right?
and you should.
My family's got to eat. That's
Yeah.
right. But I try to make sure everyone else is getting paid a very fair wage too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So,
Exactly. I think I agree. It should be about fairness and having that, the way Whole Foods does it, and a lot of other really strong organizations do it as well.
Yeah, and again, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, very low turnover. They're in retail.
Costco
right?
is another great example.
Costco's a great example.
Yeah.
And so Jim Senegal, the CEO,
Yep.
he wears his little name tag that says Jim every day. He wears a short sleeve shirt, and he'll go haul some crates, right? So, that's the guy I want to be. And so, from my perspective, in my lab, I try to do the nastiest, ugliest job first.
Yeah.
Right? So I got to process 40 tubes of blood, which we have to do all the time.
Yeah.
I'm the first guy to sign up. Yeah, I want to take a shift.
Yeah.
I want to go stand out at the student bookstore and recruit people for our roles for experiments. Yeah, I want to take the first shift in the middle of the day and see everybody doing that.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I may have to take every shift because I got to do other things too. But
Sure.
I want to be the first person doing it. So I'm a team member. Right? We're an organization.
I love your book, The Moral Molecule, and I really do wish more companies would read that and really start looking at how neuroscience and some of those factors that you've described today, and I'm really grateful for you to come and speak about that. So thank you very much. If there are any questions, please reach out to us at www.pierpoint.com. Paul, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time, your insight, and your knowledge on this subject. Thank you very much again.
I really appreciate the invitation.